Hey guys, make sure your packet is open up to section 3.1 and make sure that you are copying down the notes as I fill them in on here, all right? So first thing we need to talk about is parallel lines. The symbol for parallel lines is actually just two parallel lines. Parallel lines are coplanar and they do not intersect. So all the stuff that we learned in chapter 1 is not going away, by the way. You need to know what coplanar means. Intersect. So parallel lines are coplanar and do not intersect. Perpendicular lines, the symbol for perpendicular is actually an upside down capital T, and if you look, it actually almost forms two little right angles there. All right, that's the symbol for perpendicular. Perpendicular lines do intersect. And the special thing about that is that when they intersect, they form 90-degree angles. That was actually why I said when you draw your little upside down capital T, you create little right angles there. You do not have to draw the little box on there, okay? You just have to draw the upside down T. Skew lines, that's a new word. That is probably one you have not heard before. Skew lines are not coplanar. Skew lines are not parallel. And they do not intersect. Skew lines are probably the hardest to see. We will make sure that we talk a lot about those, don't you worry. All right, so then we've got parallel planes. Parallel planes are planes that do not intersect. So just like parallel lines don't intersect, parallel planes do not intersect either. That's the whole point of parallel. All right, then we've got transversal. A transversal is a line that intersects two coplanar lines at two different points. All right, so we will talk a lot about transversals as well, but the thing you need to remember is that it's one line that intersects two other lines. The transversal and the two other lines form 8 different angles. And those angles have these special angle pairs that we're going to talk about down below here. I know I'm going through these kind of fast and not really explaining them. This is just to get the definitions down, and we're going to do tons of examples that help explain what some of these are. Corresponding angles lie on the same side of the transversal and on the same side of the lines. Okay, so corresponding, I always think of it as corresponding angles are always in the same spot, but on different lines. Same spot on different lines. All right, alternate interior angles are, they are non-adjacent angles. That lie on opposite sides of the transversal, and they are between the lines. So they're non-adjacent, so remember they're not next to each other then. They are on opposite sides of the transversal, and they're in between the two lines that we're talking about. Alternate exterior is very similar. They are non-adjacent. Alternate exterior, sorry. They are, oh, what am I doing? Ignore me. Oh, let me try that again. Alternate exterior angles lie on different sides of the transversal. And they are outside the lines. Sorry, I started like rereading the other one, and so cross that out. That should be different, my bad, but they are also non-adjacent. Then we have same side interior angles. They lie on the, guess what, same side of the transversal. And they are inside, interior is inside. So between the lines. And then the last one is same side exterior angles, and they lie on the same side of the transversal. And they are outside the two lines that we are talking about. So again, I know we kind of just wrote down a bunch of words and didn't really talk much about it, but I promise it's going to make sense once we actually put it into some problems. So flip to the next page and let's take a look at some of these examples. Your learning targets are up at the top for you to see. All right, but we want to do number 1. We are going to identify the segments that are parallel to AB. So remember, parallel lines are coplanar and they do not intersect. So AB is right here. I'm going to highlight it with my orange marker right there. We want the segments that are parallel to AB. So the first one I would think of would be EF down here. It's like looking at the back of the box. We're looking at the bottom edge of it. So EF would be 1. Another one that is pretty easy to see is if we look at the top of the box here. DC is directly across from AB. And there is actually a third one. This one is probably the hardest one to see. However, HG is also parallel to segment AB. You almost have to think, you have to imagine that you are cutting this box in half, and that is creating almost like a slide, right? Think about cutting the box exactly in half on the diagonal there. A and B are then coplanar because that's one plane, that solid surface there, and they don't intersect. So those are parallel to each other as well. All right, we can talk more about that in class if you're having trouble kind of visualizing that. Let's take a look at number 2. Question 2 asks for segments that are skew to EF. So let's first highlight EF and figure out where it is. It's that back edge of that box. We want segments that are skew. So remember, skew means that they are not coplanar, and they're also not parallel. Not coplanar. They are not parallel, and they don't intersect. All right, that's what the word skew means. So when we look at this picture, we have to figure out, okay, what's not coplanar, what's not parallel, and what doesn't intersect. So the first one that I always look at is I look at DH. All right, so DH would be skew to EF. See how the purple and the orange, they're going different directions, so they're obviously not parallel. And they don't touch each other because DH is on the front of the box and EF is at the back of the box. All right, so they're obviously not intersecting. And they're also not coplanar, right? EF is part of the back and the bottom. DH is part of the front and the side. So they're definitely not coplanar, parallel, or intersecting lines. Similarly, CG is also one that is skew to EF. And we also have DA and CB that are skew to EF. Again, look at the green ones compared to the orange. Right? The orange is going side to side, the green are going front to back. So they're definitely not coplanar and they're definitely not parallel. And then they obviously don't intersect because they don't touch each other. All right, so those ones are skew. Those 4 answers right there are all skew to segment EF. Oops, that's a little hard to see there. How about that? DA and CB were the ones that were cut off there. Sorry about that. All right, then let's take a look. We want segments that are perpendicular to FG. So first of all, let's just write the perpendicular symbol above perpendicular just so we remember what it means. All right, perpendicular means that they intersect at 90-degree angles. Okay, so here's FG, and we want anything that is perpendicular to it. So now, it's not marked in the diagram. However, we are assuming that these figures here are boxes, which means that all of the edges are 90 degrees. So we actually have perpendicular lines right there and right here, and we have them on the base of it as well. So BF would be perpendicular to FG, and CG would be perpendicular to FG, and so would the two that are along the bottom there, HG and EF. See how those four together kind of create the right side and the bottom side of the box, right? And that's where GF lies. Okay, so those ones are perpendicular. Then let's look at parallel planes. So parallel lines, remember, never intersect each other. It's the same thing with parallel planes. So let's think back to kind of how we were doing intersections with planes in chapter 1, but now we're looking for ones that are not going to intersect. So BCGF, that is the right side of the box. So I want a plane that is not going to intersect with that one. I want one that is parallel to it. The only option there would be ADHE. It's the exact opposite side of the box there. All right, you do have to have the word plane. All right, plane, and then you can pick any of those letters. ADH, you could say plane. You could use all four, ADHE, and you can go in any order, or you can pick any of those three in any order. All right, as long as it is one of those purple ones, you are good to go. All right, moving right along, guys. Let's take a look at this question down here. So this is asking us to identify all of the angle pairs. Let me move that over so we can see those angles here. So if you notice, they're all labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Remember on the last page, we said that if we have a transversal intersecting two lines, it creates these 8 angles. So the first thing I want to do is I actually want to identify what that transversal is. So transversal is a line that intersects two other lines, which means this one right here has to be my transversal, because that's the only one that's actually hitting the other two lines. All right, so I'm gonna put a cursive letter there. I'm gonna call it L, and I'm gonna say line L is my transversal. Because being able to name all of these angles in this section right here is based on knowing which one the transversal is. All right, so let's take a look. Question 5 is asking for alternate interior angles. So alternate means that they have to be, actually let's go back that way for a second. Alternate interior means they have to be on opposite sides of the transversal. And they have to be between, that's what interior means. They have to be between my two lines. So let's go back to our picture. We highlighted our transversal as L. I'm going to go ahead and extend this line just a little bit and extend this line just a little bit. All right, I want angles that are on different sides of the transversal but are between those two lines. So I know then that I can pick 3 and 6. That would be one example. They are on different sides of L, right? Opposite, that's my alternate part. And they are in between my two blue lines. So angle 3 and angle 6 would be one example of alternate interior angles. Then my other example would be 5 and 4. Again, they're on opposite sides of the transversal, and they are in between my two blue lines. So angle 4 and angle 5. All right. Then we want to look at alternate exterior angles. So alternate, again, means opposite sides of the transversal. But now we're looking outside the blue lines. So here's my transversal. I want different sides of my transversal, and I want them to be outside the blue lines. So I'm going to start with 1 and 8. Notice that when I'm putting my angle pairs, I'm always picking one from each line. I don't want to do like 1 and 4, right? 1 and 4 would actually be vertical angles. Don't you agree? We've got two intersecting lines. They're across from each other, right? And 1 and 2, well, those would be adjacent. They're next to each other. Same with 1 and 3. we always want to pick different ones from the two different lines. So angle 1 and angle 8 are on different sides of my transversal, and they're outside my two blue lines. So angle 1 and angle 8 would be one example. And the other example would be 7 and 2. And I'm going to put little stars by those so we know those are the ones that go together. Angle 7 and angle 2. All right, so alternate means different sides of our transversal. Now we're going to look at same side interior angles. Okay, same side interior angles are obviously on the same side, and interior, we're talking about inside the two lines. So I'm not even going to look at 1, 2, 7, and 8 because those are outside. I don't care about those right now. I'm looking for same side interior. And again, I don't want to pick ones that are next to each other. None of these angles are adjacent. Okay, so same side interior angles would be 3 and 5 and 4 and 6. Angle 3 and angle 5, angle 4 and angle 6. They are on the same side, right? If I covered up this side of my transversal and I look for the ones that are in between my blue lines, it's 3 and 5. And I can do the same thing on this side. Cover up that side of the transversal because I'm looking for ones that are on the same side. I want same side and I want in between my two blue lines. That's my 4 and 6. We do the exact same thing for same side exterior. If I covered up this side of my transversal, which two angles are outside of my blue lines? It's 1 and 7. And I'm going to cover this one up, and hopefully you guys can see then my same side exterior is 2 and 8. All right, hopefully you guys are doing all right, hanging in there with me. All right, so we got one more we got to do on this page. Corresponding angles. I always think of corresponding angles as being in the same spot. All right, so let's go over to our picture really quick. Notice how angles 1, 2, 3, and 4 are all dealing with this top line here, right? If I pick up those 4 angles and I place them down on top of these ones, we want to know which ones would exactly match. All right, corresponding angles are on the same side of the transversal and they're in the same spot on the lines. So I'm going to cover up this side. If I wanted to know which angle is corresponding to angle 1, well, I'm on the left side of my transversal and I'm on top of my blue line. So when I go down to this blue line, I want to know which one is on the left side of my transversal and on top of the blue line. So that one would be angle 5. So one set of corresponding angles would be angle 1 and angle 5. Again, think about taking the 1 and you're just bringing it on down here. It's just replacing the 5. And then hopefully you can see the rest of those pairs. 2 and 6 would go together. Angle 2 and angle 6 would be corresponding angles. And then angle 3 and angle 7. And last but not least, angle 4 and angle 8. I know this is a lot of information quickly. Hopefully you guys are doing all right. We just have a couple more things we got to talk about really quick, okay? So take a look at page 5 real fast. We want to identify the transversal and classify each angle pair. Well, this looks a little different than the other one we were just doing, doesn't it? So what I want you guys to do first is figure out which angles we're talking about. So we're looking at angle 1 and angle 4. So here's angle 1 and here's angle 4. Okay, if we circle those, we can kind of see where they're at in our figure, right? And the first thing I would do is I would highlight the line that touches both of them. So if we look here, hopefully you guys agree with me, that line L makes up part of angle 1 and it makes up part of angle 4. That means then that that's my transversal. So my transversal is line L. Okay. Then we need to figure out what type of angle pair they are. So if it helps, I actually cover up part of the figure here. Let me just grab my post-it note, sorry. I'm going to cover up this part because it doesn't matter. I don't care what's going on under there. Okay, what I care about is I found my transversal and I want to figure out what types of angles these are. So the first thing I look at is I go, oh, well, one's on top of my transversal and one's on the bottom, which means they have to be alternate of some sort. They're either alternate interior or alternate exterior because they're on different sides of my transversal. And then when I look, here's my other two lines that I'm talking about. Well, 1 and 4 are not in between those lines, are they? They're outside those lines. So these would be alternate exterior angles. And I am okay with you abbreviating. You can put Alt-X angles, okay? But hopefully covering up the busyness down here kind of helps. I think when the lines are intersecting, there's a lot of other stuff going on. So if you circle the two angles and you draw in your transversal, then it's just a matter of figuring out, okay, are they on the same side of the transversal or different sides of the transversal? And then you can kind of move on from there. All right, we are actually going to do the rest of these problems in class because I want to be able to talk to you guys and see how we're feeling. Plus, I don't want your video to really be any longer. So hopefully you got all that down. Feel free to re-watch it if you're struggling on any part of it. As you watched, hopefully you were writing down questions if you had them. If not, kind of go back and see where your questions were. Write them down and we will talk about them in class. But we will do 11, 12, and 13 together as a class. All right, I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.